So anyway, it's certainly happy to be here and share some of my thoughts as we transition from a strictly a show ring flock 12 years ago, and now we're strictly a performance flock, and it certainly was a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties that we've faced over the last 12 years, but hopefully we're moving forward now. I would like to maybe have a little bit of full disclosure here, so nobody's expecting more or something different than what I'm going to give them. And first of all, I'm not a scientist. I'm not versed in the theory of quantitative genetics, nor am I an educator that's got skilled presentation skills, as you're about to find out over the next half an hour or so. What I am is just an old purebred breeder, and we've been doing this for 50 years or so, and when we decided to switch, there was a lot of challenges and obstacles and breaking a lot of habits as we went through this process. And a lot of what I'm going to say tonight is probably anecdotal, but hopefully it's grounded in the theory of quantitative genetics. I actually started my career, it was about 60 years ago this year. This is a photo from about 1954, and I started when I was trimming Shropshires for my father. And for those of you who are not familiar with those early Shropshires, that's what they looked like back in the early 50s. The real point here that I want to make is when you've been doing something for over a half a century, either as myself or as an industry, it makes for a lot of habits that we've done, and it makes them really tough to break, and change is tough after that many years, and that was probably the biggest challenge I think not only I face, but most people will face, is just the change. So why did we change? Why did we decide to go from a show flock to production flock? First of all, as purebred breeders, I always thought that our purpose as producers was to promote the genetic change to the commercial industry. And certainly in the last few decades, I think our major breeds have lost that focus. And in fact, relating my experience to the Rambouillet years, when we bred and showed Rambouillets for 25 years, the commercial value of the Rambouillets that we had when we started our program 25 years, well, more than 25 years ago now, but when we started, and after 25 years, I really believe we had a worse product for the commercial man than when we started, and that's really a pretty sad commentary on a big part of my career. The other thing we saw, even though I'm not a cattle producer, we have cattle friends, and I read a lot about cattle stuff, and I was starting to notice all the rapid genetic progress and change they were making, and I thought using the CBV stuff is probably got something to it. So we decided to make the change. And then we faced, like I said, we faced a lot of challenges, and what I'd like to do tonight is kind of discuss three of the challenges that were major to me, and we'll kind of go through these point by point, but basically those early years I was really disappointed in how my EBV showed up. Secondly, management was such a big factor in the show ring tradition, and we had to change our whole way of thinking when it came to management. Third, was probably the most difficult. After I judged quite a few shows from around the country, and you always have a picture of that perfect sheep in your mind, and that was probably the hardest thing to realize, that when we're selecting sheep, that perfect picture really doesn't count a whole lot anymore. Okay, challenge one. Why was I disappointed? And probably first of all, I thought I had a Lake Wobegon flock. And for those of you who listen to NPR and Garrison Keillor and maybe this Prairie Home Companion know this little quote here. I've adjusted a little bit. If not, the point here is I thought all my sheep were above average. And I think that's probably not untypical of breeders who have spent a lot of time and effort in their breeding program over years, and then you go to find out that maybe they're not as good as you thought they were. The first thing I realized, the computer really doesn't care about a lot of things I thought was important to the industry. At first I thought it was just in retaliation off of the swearing and the times that I'd said I was just going to throw the computer out the window, but after some thought, I really think the computer is just pretty apathetic to a lot of the things I care about, or I thought the industry cared about. It really didn't care about how long I'd been breeding sheep. It didn't care how many ribbons I still had in my show box. It didn't care for how empty a bank account I had and how many dollars I'd spent on champions. And it really didn't make any difference what other people thought of me, if they thought I was a good breeder or not. The computer just did not care. So what did the computer care about? The computer likes numbers. It likes data. And until I was able to provide that computer with the right data and a lot of data, they thought my sheep were average. And that's the way the system works. Until you can prove differently, the NSIP computer is going to call your sheep average. So why was I disappointed? I think we talked about the first one. My sheep weren't as good as I thought they were. We thought we had an elite flock. We didn't. And the second reason was I wasn't very patient. You know, everyone that goes into the program has very little data to back up their performance. Even if you're using a proven ram, you have no data on your females. So I wasn't patient enough to let the data build up in my flock. The third thing is I had no genetic links. And I think when I started the program 12 years ago, I didn't even know what a genetic link was. And so that's something I had to learn about, and it's really important as we move forward and if you want to make progress within the system. This is my big fat loser, and I've just named him that in the last couple of years. But anyway, this is a ram we used the first 2 or 3, I guess, first 3 years we were in the program, and we thought it was a great ram. You know, what's really not to like? A big, heavy-boned, thick top kind of a ram. He had a great pedigree. He had, he's sired a national champion ram. He had a national champion ram in his dam side. And he actually, the first year we had him, he actually sired a national champion ram at Louisville. And so he had the pedigree about him. So what was not to like? He was actually a bottom feeder when it came to the indexes. Our terminal sire index called Carcass Plus, he was pretty much right on the bottom. And we didn't discover that till later on, so we continued to use him for 3 years. In fact, his only redeeming thing was he died after 3 years before he did even more harm. So why was I so slow to realize this ram was not the right kind of ram? First of all, we had limited data. We were just getting started. We had limited data. Everything comes back towards the average. Secondly, I constructed extremely poor contemporary groups. We thought this ram was so good, why would we compare him to any other rams? And so we really didn't. I didn't put in another good ram, breed him to 30 ewes and have a good comparison with this ram. So we had poor contemporary groups. Third, we had no outside links. We were not linked to other breeders, so I did not even have any other Suffolk breeders helping me with information. Only thing I had to go on was the information that was coming out of my flock, and it was bad. Probably the thing that's really sent him south was I completely misread his carcass data. We were using this ram before we started collecting carcass data, and so I had to go by my expert judging ability, which apparently isn't very good, because I completely misread fat from muscle. He was a good, thick, big, heavy-boned ram, but that thickness came from fat and not from muscle. And once its data started to come back on his progeny, once we started getting scan information, he headed south in a hurry, and in fact, he continues to get worse and worse every year as I look at his index. Once we kind of figured that out, after a couple of years, we knew we had to change. And so we decided to go up north to the state of Michigan, and that's really hard for a Buckeye to do, to go to any place up in Michigan. But we did go up to the University of Michigan, and Alan Collum, who is an expert to me, geneticist, and has been doing this a long time with not only his own flock, but the Michigan State flock, gave us a lot of advice. And he also let us use one of his proven stud rams from the university. And this ram they'd used for 3 years, and I brought him down and used him in my flock for 1 year. And it had just changed everything completely right off the bat. Number one, we had a proven sire that had proven performance records. So we knew we were going to make a giant leap, and we did. And secondly, because Michigan State had sent out so many sons out of this ram into different NSIP flocks, we were also connected to a lot of other NSIP flocks all over the nation. In fact, I think it probably connected it to about half the Suffolk flocks. So after that point, we were really was able to begin to make some progress as far as our production traits. I'd like to take just a couple minutes and go over some information about genetic links, and I just, if you're like I was, I didn't even know what a genetic link was, and it's the pedigree connection between sheep. And the example would be if I had a stud ram and I sent out 2 different sons to 2 different flocks, all 3 of our flocks would then be connected genetically, and we would have a genetic link, and information then flows between those 3 flocks. And it's the only way that we can actually compare flocks, different flocks, have cross-flock evaluation. So how do we create genetic links? Probably the most common is you identify a superior sire out there in the breed, and you go out and you buy a son, and that creates a genetic link with from that flock that you bought the ram from. What I prefer, and if you can get it done, is to share a stud with another NSIP flock. Do like we did the first year, is go and find a proven stud, and either lease him or buy him. Secondly, you can jointly buy a good stud with another NSIP breeder and share that ram. I think you have to remember they don't have to be used in the same year. That's not necessarily the case to get your genetic links. And then, of course, the use of artificial insemination with cedars now. That's going to become more popular. We see more and more technicians able to do the work, and certainly artificial insemination will become an important part of transfer. Okay, Susan says I have a message here. You know, Oogie, I hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I think I'll let Reed answer that, and he's more involved with that kind of stuff. So Reed, if you'll just type in an answer there, there we go. And I shall move on. Anyway, I think this genetic lengthening is really a big deal, and the thing is, you just have to find a way to exchange genetics with other participating NSIP flocks. Now, I really would not recommend the fourth way there, but it's probably been done a time or two within the sheep industry. But there's probably is better ways. And as we end this thing, you really do need to develop relationships with other NSI breeders. You know, you've got to find somebody out there who shares your vision, your goals, buddy up with them, and start sharing some rants and some ideas. What I actually think as I look to the future, I think what I'm seeing is, because our seed stock industry is made up of a lot of small independent producers with a lot of ewes, I think we're going to see a lot of breeding group schemes put together, and where a group of dedicated breeders will join up, make a systematic approach of sharing rams, and move forward just as if they were a larger flock. And there's a group of, I think, 6 polypape breeders doing that currently, and I think we're making a lot of progress. And anyway, I see that down the road as the future. But the whole idea of exchanging genetics is just so important if you want to make progress. My second challenge, this whole idea about management, and the management is not going to make your higher EBVs. And you know, the whole thing we learned in 4-H is you could take a little runt lamb, and you could take care of him, you could feed him, and you could water him, and have the best husbandry that you could have. And at the end of the summer, you could take him to the fair, and you could have a champion. That's just not the way it works in the NSIP program. That's not what it's about. You know, the whole show ring philosophy is so much about management, and you know, and I would estimate at least 50% of success we had in the show ring happened after that lamb was born. And you know, I'd feed 2 or 3 times a day on a regular basis. We'd put fans during the summer and have our secret rations that would work, and then we'd put hours of prep time before a show sheep ever went into the show ring. Management was just so important. In the NSIP program, it's completely different. The whole program is structured to take out the management, to take out the different environments that these sheep are raised in, take out the different managements. It's a completely different way of how we view taking care of our sheep. I got Brian. Before we move on here, you know, it's tough. You have to. I think the NSIP sale is an excellent way to meet people. You know, it's where all the NSI people get together, go out a day ahead and talk to those people, see who's got the same views as you, and but it is tough. You know, my nearest Suffolk breeder is over 150 miles away. I can't go to my neighbor and talk sheep, and or at least talk to them about something they would understand. It is how you develop networks is tough. Okay, I'm going to move on here. Everybody's has their aha moment at times where you just kind of slap yourself up against the forehead and you say, this is finally starting to make a little bit of sense. Now I can see now I can maybe see a little bit. It had happened to me, I'm not sure how many years ago, but what it was is when I realized everything focused on what mating decisions I had. And because all breeding values, and that's breeding values kind of equal genetics, that's the actual DNA that makes up, that influence a trait, the breeding values, that once you have conception, once the egg and the sperm meet, you're not going to change breeding values. There is just no way to change them. You can feed them, you can put fans on them, you can teach them to dance on a table, but you're not going to change their breeding value. And that's just a fundamental thing that I had to learn. But that doesn't mean that management doesn't make a difference. To me, what management does is when we talk about EBVs, and that's the estimated breeding values, what we can have an influence is the estimate of that true breeding value. And to me, that's the most important thing, and that's what I focus all my management in after I make mating decisions. All my management goes into how do I improve my estimates to make them closer to the true breeding values. And I think if we think of an EBV in those terms, that they are estimates, and our goal as managers is to see how close we can come to true breeding values. I guess I didn't move the slide there. Read quick because we're going to move on to the next point here. So why are accuracies important? I think the most obvious reason is when you have better accuracies, you get closer again to that breeding value, and it helps you make better decisions about which rams to use as your sires, which ewes to put back in your replacements. And again, that's the major decision you'll make all year long, is which ram you use, which ewes you breed them to. And so all your other management actually rolls back into that one major goal. The other thing, of course, higher accuracies can mean is when you sell a sheep to somebody, they perform as advertised. If somebody comes to me that wants a ram that's going to breed higher and bigger loin eyes, then if I've got some good accuracies, they will do that. And a happy customer is a repeat customer. Okay, my keys to more accurate EBVs, and Cody spent a lot of time on that, and if you were with us last week, the biggest thing to me is develop strong contemporary groups. And again, just to refresh everybody's mind, a contemporary group is that set of lambs born on your farm within a certain age group. I think it's 42 days, and they're all managed the same. And actually, that's how all our comparisons are made, and that's the basis. The NSIP program does not compare raw data between flocks. It doesn't compare them between contemporary groups. The only place that raw data is ever actually compared is within that contemporary group. And so it becomes the basis of all the comparisons within NSIP, and that's why they're so important. All of the other comparisons when we talk between flocks is made by genetic links, and even between contemporary groups, those are all made by genetic links. Oh, Dan, yeah. I certainly, again, Dan, I'm not sure I can answer that for sure. It would certainly be, I think I'm going to let Reed answer that one too. So he's so much more in tune to some of these things than I'm just, like I say, I'm just an old breeder. My 3 tips, and these are pretty short. They're not certainly not as comprehensive as what Cody presented last week. Mine's pretty simple. We found the shortening lambing periods are so important, and we're much like Cody. He shortened to 21 days with 2 groups, and so did we. We breed our old ewes for 121 day period, come back in a few weeks and do our ewe lambs in any old ewes, and that's really helped when we've shortened that period. I think we get more uniform set of lambs. It's easier to manage that set of lambs when they're born within a shorter lambing period. Use at least 2 rams in each contemporary group. One year we thought we'd be really bright, and we thought we had 5 pretty good ram lambs. They were all pretty close, and we would just use all 5. And we set up pretty good contemporary groups, used all 5 ram lambs, had enough progeny we can compare them all, and we did. We ranked those rams, I thought, pretty good, and so I had a good idea of which of those rams was the best and which was the worst. What we did not do is the third point here. We did not put a proven ram in that group. So even though I ranked those top 5 rams really well, I had no idea where they fit within the Suffolk breed. I didn't know if that next year if I even wanted to use the top one, because I never connected him to any of the other sheep in the Suffolk breed. And so that was the mistake, and from that point on, we've tried to use a proven ram in each of our contemporary groups. Couple things that I think you shouldn't do, and the first is comparing raw data with your neighbors, and it's just not what the system is meant to do. We have our scanner come in every year, and she's a really good cattle person. She does a lot of cattle. She's really strong and knows what's going on with the estimated breeding values in the cattle industry and what they mean and how they work. And so we kind of play this game when we're scanning lambs. We just scan. We just use depth. That's all I ask her to ever give me. But she'll be going along, and she'll say, this is what I think we'll take area measurements on, and she'll trace it and give me the area right. And she says, put that down in the bragging rights column. And that's about all it is. It's for bragging rights. So you can go to the coffee shop the next day and tell everybody how big a loin you had. It really doesn't have a lot of significance when it comes to comparing genetics. Again, it's just so important to me that we resist the temptation to use a lot of data. The NSIP program has a job to do, and that job is to take raw data and make it into comparable data. And we need to let that NSIP program work for you. And so let that do the work, and let's don't be like the fishermen out there that, the big fish that got away. Some of that data can get pretty exaggerated. Let's just let that NSIP program work for you. Challenge 3, and this was probably the hardest one for me. You know, I had locked in my mind the picture of a perfect sheep, and I trimmed that way when I got them ready for a show. I judged that way when I was judging fairs. You have the perfect picture, and what I had to learn is this isn't a beauty contest, and actually, if that sheep functions the way you want it to function in your flock, if it's doing everything you want it to do, keep it. Don't worry about what it looks like. Keep it and use it and move on. And you know, I think one of the things I hear at least once a year from some breeder when I say, why don't you try NSIP? And he says, I'm not going to go to a barn every morning and feed sheep I don't like to look at. And I finally got to the point where, you know, I don't want to go to the barn every day and feed a sheep that's not profitable. And so that's been my reply to that challenge the last few years. So my old traditional way of selecting sheep, big, thick, heavy-boned sheep, that's got to equal fast-growing, heavy-muscled lambs. That's just the way I thought. That's just like my big fat loser. You know, he's big, he was thick, he was heavy-boned. He had to be fast-growing and heavy-muscled. He was not. My new standard, lambs that weigh more, scan larger loin eyes. Those are fast-growing, heavy-muscled sheep. I think it's so hard to use numbers over a physical form. We've been having some discussions recently with a good commercial producer, and he says he needs to market a heavier lamb to be profitable, which makes a lot of sense to me. So he said, you know, I want those same fast-growing lambs, but you've got to give me a ram that's got more frame, because I'm going to produce a heavier lamb, and I want these lambs to still be lean at a heavier weight. And in the old way of thinking of things, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. That's what we always thought. Get bigger frame sheep and you can produce a bigger lamb, bigger lean lamb. My suggestion to him, why don't we go to EBVs? Why don't we look at the EBV for fat? We've got Carcass data now. And let's look at a ram that has a lower EBV for fat. That will let you produce lambs that are less fat at a heavier weight. And that's what you want. And I think it's a better predictor than using frame size. My favorite thing every spring was sit in a bale of straw and watch my lambs. Watch those early lambs grow, and by 90 days, I knew who my stud rams were. I watched them. I know their numbers. I could pick out those 5 top rams, and I said, one of those are going to be my stud ram. Then when my records came back, I'd maybe adjust those lambs a little bit because of records. But I really didn't change my, one of those 5 rams was going to be the ram I used. Now we don't do it that way. Now I try not to even look at those lambs except for health reasons until we get data back. I don't want to be biased. And then we pull out those top 5 performing rams, we put those in a pen, and then I rank those 5 rams according to their appearance, and my next stud ram will come out of that group. It's just a different way of ranking. It's a different way of analyzing our sheep. The other thing we did, I've really got this thing now as I'm getting older. I want everything to move faster. So I want to make a difference before I croak here. So what we really kind of did at that point, instead of making a lot of selection criteria, we set some standards for everything, some basic minimum standards for everything except for what we wanted to move forward on, and that was growth and muscle. So all those other traits, we just put a basic minimum standard on. If they passed, they could be eligible for a flock. If they didn't pass, they went to slaughter. Of course, we had different standards for stud rams than our replacement ewes. Our standards are changing from year to year. But what it does, it allowed me to really move forward on those two traits that I was concentrating on, but not allow the functionality of my flock to drop below a certain standard. And it's worked for me the last few years, and so I think we'll probably continue to move forward with that. The elephant in the room for some of you, I know, and if you come from my tradition, I worried about it. Can I show and be on NSIP? And my answer is yes, but be realistic with your expectations. We actually tried. That was our intent when we got when we started into the program. We thought we could show and be on the NSIP program, and we did that for about 4 years. And we actually, I'd say, we failed. That's saying it nicely, yeah. And why did we feel that way? I think first of all, when we compared ourselves to other Suffolk breeders that were on NSIP, I wasn't catching the leaders. We just were not able to move fast enough on those performance traits to catch the leaders when we're still trying to produce a show sheep. And the other thing we did, again, I went to the cattle industry and I looked what those leading bull producers, those leading commercial bull producers were doing. They were going away from the show ring. They were concentrating and they were really making progress just on performance traits, and we decided that's what we wanted to do, and so we gave up the show ring. So what if you do want to go ahead and show your sheep? You can do it, but this is what I see happening. On the left, I kind of put the criteria, at least for Suffolks, if I was going to participate in a show ring, the major things I'd have to select for: frame size, feet and legs, this thing called balance and profile and style, all that work together, and breed type. On the right, I wrote what my 3 priorities are as far as our goals now, and it's growth, muscle, and we have to keep the feet and legs correct on them. As you can see, there's just not a lot of crossover there. You know, outside of feet and leg correctness, none of them match. And so what happens if you're selecting for the show ring and performance both, you're selecting for 6 different things that you have to put emphasis on. I only had, for going for performance, I only have to put emphasis on 3. Which allows me to move so much faster with my traits than if I was selecting for 6. So that's kind of what I think happens when you try to do both. What to expect in your flock? I don't think there's any doubt but what you're going to see marked improvement in the productivity of your show flock. When we did it, we were able to lop off the bottom 20% of our ewes really quick. We got those poor producing ewes out of there, and it did not affect what we were doing in the show ring at all. What we found much harder to do was to move the top end. We were not able to move our top end fast enough towards performance goals, and I think that's what you'll find too. You'll just have a really tough time keeping pace with those breeders who strictly want to have a performance-oriented flock. This is kind of about it for me, and I think I will just read that because it really sums up my feelings about NSIP, performance, and where the industry needs to go. With EBVs, we have the opportunity to create a new paradigm in how we view and select our sheep. If we wish to meet the demands of our ever-changing industry, we must be willing to change. We'll have to break some habits along the way. And I really believe that, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we face as an industry, is being willing to change. And it's never easy, especially with the tradition we have within the seed stock industry. Next is just a couple of pictures. I kind of scanned them in, and I went to the work of scanning them in, and I thought somebody had to see them if I was going to go to the work. Anyway, this is a ram, our genetics selection from 1974 back in Virginia, the Eastern Stud Ram sale, and then we moved on in 2014 to a little different kind of a Suffolk ram, and this happens to be the high indexing Suffolk ram. So anyway, I think that pretty much finishes me up, and maybe if there's some questions, and Reed's doing a real good job of answering questions, and I'll kind of follow along here, and if I can chime in on some of the questions that I read, I will. And we got a lot of people typing. That's not good. Okay. Oh, they're jumping faster than I can read them. And I'm hoping that protocol for developing genetic links for maternal breeds. I think it is, when you look at smaller flocks, I think it is, Judy, I think it really is tough. And I think that's one reason why some of our breeders that have low number of ewes will have to be in breeding groups. You'll have to find other people you can they're going the same way and actually have an organized group. And I believe it's the future of what we're going to have to do within the United States, because we have so many small flocks. Susan, is breeding more satisfying? It's probably a lot more satisfying, but I don't think it's definitely not any more profitable. We made a good living off the show ring, and people will pay a lot of money to buy something they'll think will win the show ring. They're not quite willing to pay a lot of money for something just performance yet. And so in the sense of being a good breeder, it's a lot more satisfying, but economically I probably can't say that at this point. Oh, Dale. Dale's my good buddy. He's one of my people we share rams with all the time. Dale Dobberpool from up there, Wisconsin. And good question, Dale. Yes, I think it will give us more dollars in future. You know, I don't work a lot with the Packers or anything, but you know, I think they are looking at grids now and instrument grading on the rail that will better identify heavier muscled sheep and give you premiums for that. So yeah, I think that is in the future of the industry. Yeah, Duffield's right on, you know, that's how I first got to know Bill when he brought rams down the station. He got them to me and I would take them on down. And the interesting thing is how we've progressed from the old central test stations. And, you know, the NSIP program compared to these central tests, it's just head and shoulders above those old central tests. So this is such a better way to go than the central tests like we had in Ohio. But they were a good start. It started people talking about numbers. We get, oh yeah, we got people answering. We got Reed answering. We got Jim Morgan answering. I don't have to do anything. Cody's answering. Oh, we're in really great shape. You know, I'm going to try to pick out some questions here that I might be able to answer. Most of them probably should be answered by somebody that has a little more knowledge than I have. And Oogie, do I get Carcass, and I am assuming that's talking to me, do you get any Carcass data back on your slaughter sheep? We do not, but we make a real attempt to probably get 80% of our lambs scanned. I do not ship very many lambs to market before we scan, and we do that at 120 days. I do not let any purebred sheep go before we get 120-day weights, and it's cost me some sales. But we're committed to the idea that we want to get as much data on as many lambs as we can. So we make a purpose attempt to make sure we get at least 80% of our lambs, and that includes ewe lambs scanned. Okay. Well, Oogie, my cost of scanning, we have a good scanner. She's only about 50 miles away, maybe a little less than that. And she'll come in, and I give her $5 a head. She comes in twice, and we're doing about 100 head total. So it's $500 I give her for 2 trips. The scanning itself takes so little time that she's in and out in a couple hours. How long have we been ultrasounding? I think that's from Reed. We've been doing it for about 8 hours or 8 years now. In a day, it's actually, it gives you more information to use, and then it becomes on what you want to do with that information. We decided several years ago we don't want to have any carcasses that are below average for the breed, either for muscle or for loin eye. We do not want to have any sheep below the average. So we started putting a lot of emphasis on our loin eye size, just so we could get up to average. And I think, as a lot of you know or may not know, there's a negative correlation between growth and muscle. And so our early years were devoted to growth, and it just killed our muscle. So the last few years we had some catching up to do. And so we put a lot of emphasis in the last few years on trying to get heavier muscle sheep. And that's one reason we went to Dale Doperpool, who is kind of known for his large loin eyes. This is, I'm not sure, Riddell, that's a good question about a proven ram. I think there's 2 scenarios and I probably used proven twice and meant 2 different things. A proven ram like we got from Michigan State was a stud ram that they had used, and we could have used the son of that ram and made our genetic links. When I refer to a proven ram within a contemporary group, then it probably is, no, you have to use the ram that was that had been used before, a ram that had been used in a contemporary group before. And so I used proven in 2 different contexts there, but using a son of a proven ram from a good breeder is an excellent way to get genetics, but it does not work if you're trying to compare within your contemporary groups. You have to use a proven RAM that was used in one of your other contemporary groups. Okay. What range of lambs we have in scanning? This is from DOIC. We're actually pretty heavy. We scan at 120-day weights. We really push our lambs, so we get some big lambs. Our buck lambs probably average 140 to 190 pounds when we scan. Our ewe lambs are probably 110 pounds to 160 pounds. So some of those are pretty heavy weights. Some people think that's maybe don't get quite as good a data. I talking with Dave Nodder, I think we're okay even doing those. I think my eyes are going bad. Everything's moving too fast, and if there's... We okay? Okay, Mary and Jerry says it's a great job. I can leave. I'm on my way to get a cool one somewhere, and we're gonna bring Susan back in here, and I certainly would like to thank Susan for helping orchestrate this whole thing, and thank the NSIP people with Reed Redden and everyone. It's been a great series so far, and hopefully people are learning something from it. So if I can get Susan back on this microphone.